Hello everyone, today Vedangi and I will be presenting on human rights and sovereignty. So what are human rights? Human rights, according to the UN, include the right to life and liberty, freedom from slavery and torture, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to work and education, along with many other things. And these rights are inherent to every single human being, regardless of their race, gender, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. So everyone is entitled to these rights without discrimination. Today we're going to be looking specifically at Article 15, which states that everyone has the right to a nationality and no one can be deprived of their nationality nor denied the right to change their nationality. So our case study and question for today is, to what extent has the Dominican Republic's discrimination against Dominicans of Haitian descent challenged the nation's sovereignty? So a little bit of context on what our case study is talking about. This will just help us understand the reasoning of the actions that are happening. So from the 19th to the 20th century, Haiti was under colonization by France, whereas its neighbor, the Dominican Republic, was under colonial rule by Spain. So France abused the land and they brought in hundreds of slaves and focused on making the land an economic producer and didn't pay any consideration to any of the land or nature or whatever. So after Haiti achieved independence, France demanded a return for all the assets, and this left Haiti in a crippling debt. Now, this debt, along with other factors like natural disasters, dictatorships, and corruption, heavily hampered the development of Haiti. And this is why there was such a big difference between the two neighboring countries during this time. So many Haitian people immigrated illegally to the wealthier Dominican Republic. And keep in mind that during this time, immigration was something that was encouraged because it would help countries stabilize their economy and boost it. Now fast forward to 2013. In September, the government of the Dominican Republic passed a judgment which stripped the Dominican nationality to the descendants of these immigrants. And keep in mind that these descendants they were born in the Dominican Republic, they grew up there, and they were now working there. And most of these people had never even stepped foot in Haiti, and they identified themselves as Dominican. Regardless of this judgment was passed, and it led to the estimated mass deportation of about 70 to 80,000 Dominicans of Haitian descent. And so Vedangi will talk about the impact this had.
Well, we can look at this through several different levels of analysis. If we look at it through a community point, we can say that it tore apart families because, as you heard earlier, there was at least 70,000 people who had been mass deported back to Haiti. It also prevented them from having a say in their country because they could no longer vote and use the vote to have an impact in the Dominican Republic as they were no longer citizens. On a national level, this led to widespread protests against this new ruling. Also, the Dominican Constitution had been altered to make space for this new law because the Dominican government had an interest in declaring these people's documents illegitimate. So as not to set a precedent for granting legal status to these Dominican-born people of Haitian descent, they changed it. So now the law specified that citizenship may not be granted to Dominican-born children of Haitian workers, because despite these workers living permanently in the country, they were classified as being in transit. This law was set by the Supreme Court, which shows the extent of which it has enveloped the country, so there's no chance to appeal or overturn it. On an international level, there were several other agencies involved, such as the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. However, despite their interference, there was still widespread discrimination when getting birth certificates and legalized documents. This new law also goes against what the UN calls equality to dignity and rights, as their access to basic services such as healthcare and education was denied due to their legal standing. We can The global political challenge that this links to is their identity, because we can see that due to these people's identity, being Dominican of Haitian descent, they were discriminated against and their nationality was taken away from them. The Dominican Republic claimed in its constitution claims to be against discrimination. However, this law makes it seem like the Dominican Republic are hypocrites, as this law is discriminatory. It also nationality documentation are a big part of who you are, and taking that away is unfair for people. The main reason for this new law was by the Dominican politicians, who said that anyone can claim Dominican nationality based on forged documents, as anyone can say they were born in the Dominican Republic by having a false birth certificate, and this would set a dangerous precedent for other people claiming Dominican nationality based on their place of birth, based on the concept of jus soli, which means you can claim the nationality of where you were born. However, what the Dominican government failed to acknowledge was the legal barriers to getting these documents recognised and legitimised. The Dominican government had refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of birth certificates that were issued to Dominican-born Haitian children in the past. Also, the Dominican government had failed to issue birth certificates to Dominican-born Haitian children in the first place, and when these birth certificates were able to be issued, there was a charging of exorbitant fees for birth certificates, which made it nearly impossible for Haitian or Haitian Dominican families to afford. And even when there were documents, people of Haitian descent were forced out of the country through mass deportations very quickly, which meant they didn't have time to gather their documents and papers, which might provide evidence of legal documentation. We can also look at this through several different perspectives. If you look at this through a liberal perspective, we can say that it's not fair to take away the citizenship of the descendants of the undocumented, because immigration was encouraged if they were doing nothing wrong. However, you can also say that it wasn't the descendants who chose to move, so it's not fair to punish them for something they didn't do. It also links to identity, because it's not fair to discriminate against the largest minority group in the Dominican Republic, as they are Dominican growing up there. However, if you look at this through a capitalist perspective, we can say that it leaves more resources strictly for the pure Dominicans, as there's less people for it to go round, and it's not a challenge to their sovereignty, because there's less people to persuade to vote for the ruling party.
Okay, so basically, as we saw, the government itself had indicated that its main objective when passing this judgment was to create a country without exclusion or discrimination, and to show its fierce commitment to respect for human rights. However, this judgment goes against that, as it's taking away the fundamental right of these migrant workers. Um, so we think that the Dominican government needs to restore the rights of these thousands of people who now have been stateless for a long time. And it's definitely worrying to see that a state that claims to be so committed to respecting human rights is turning its back on mechanisms that were designed to protect those rights in the first place. We need to keep in mind that migrant workers offer an example of how upholding the rights and freedoms of migrants does not undermine state sovereignty, but strengthens state. The core Human Rights Convention recognizes that all migrant workers are entitled to legal protection within the international human rights regime. Managing the migration of these workers is fundamental to ensuring that stability and development of the states is achieved, especially in like a globalized world where we see that labor mobility or movement of people across state borders for employment is key. Since migrant workers contribute to the economic and human development of these countries, it's really important for the Dominican Republic to meet the fundamental rights of these workers, because if it does fail, probably won't help the country's sovereignty in any way and will instead weaken it significantly. In our opinion, there needs to be some form of reconciliation between the Dominicans of Haitian descent and the Dominican Republic, and steps need to be taken to prevent and reduce the anti-Haitian sentiment, as well as fix this citizenship issue to be able to have more of an inclusive state. Um, yeah, so these are the citations, these are the sources we used, and that is all we have for today. Thank you for watching.